Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your host Shuggy, an amateur film reviewer and nerd.
And I am Nye, Shug's knight in shining armour.
Oh, that one's cute.
Yeah.
And we're going with your pick of Blast from the Past this week.
Yes, and this is a film that I watched a couple of times when I was a kid. A family friend of ours used to have it on video. God, you remember them. So when I was at hers, I used to watch it. And I vaguely remembered it, and I remembered elements of it, but couldn't remember what it was called. And then I think my dad reminded me of it a few weeks ago. And I was so glad that it came back into my life. And I wanted to bring it onto the podcast, just so I got a chance to rewatch it again. Very intrigued to hear what you thought.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this film before. I'll be honest, never once. And I saw when you mentioned it last time, I saw the cast. I thought that's a great cast, Brendan Fraser, Christopher Walken, Sissy Spacek.
Mm-hmm.
Saw the synopsis, wasn't convinced.
Okay.
And I've watched it, and you know what? Really cute, really enjoyed the film. Just a pleasant time.
Yeah, I thought it was a nice film to watch.
Yeah.
It was pretty feel good. It was not trying too hard. And I didn't think that the acting or the performances were particularly unbelievable, but in terms of the quality, I thought they were okay. But I felt that they suited the film really well.
I might come back on you a little bit. I think without Brendan Fraser being so endearing and charming, this film is terrible. I think this film rests on Brendan Fraser's performance, and he is so good that it works. Okay.
Well, I think he makes. You're right that he makes this film, and I just thought it suited the film very well. I think that was it is undeniably what gives the film its tone.
Yeah, I agree. I think it suits the film down to a T, and honestly, that's all you can ask, is that it's the right performance for the film. You can give this amazing performance in. Okay, an example. Recently, film came out. Zack Snyder's new zombie film, Army of the Dead, on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Bautista plays the lead. I think Dave Bautista is very good in the film. He gets to show kind of his sort of deeper emotional side, the pathos he can bring to a character. And it is so different from 70% of the film around him that it kind of doesn't work at all.
Right.
So
okay. Yeah.
Is it a good performance if it's in that film? I don't know. Whereas this, I think it's the perfect performance for the film. And I think it really sells the film completely.
In which case, when you put it in those terms, I concede. Very good performance. I think Brendan Fraser in it is good, and it's just very enjoyable to watch. Very, very cute, very sweet.
Sort of, there's an era of comedies and rom-coms from around kind of the 2000s where you had like Matthew McConaughey, Katherine Heigl, Ashton Kutcher in kind of all these rom-coms. And, Paul Feig was like one of the big comedic voices. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a huge fan of that era of comedy, so I was really pleasantly surprised.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad that you liked it. And I have also got to say it felt poetic that there was somewhat of a cameo from Nathan Fillion in there as well. Yeah. I did actually not realise he was in it, and then as soon as his face popped up, I thought Shug's probably beaming. So
yeah, 100% loved it.
I'm sure that played into your good books as well.
I'll very quickly run through some pre-production, and there it is. That's done. I'm not joking. I went on. I was looking at IMDb. I was searching up, trying to find articles. There are a couple of articles about this film, but they're kind of nostalgia pieces. Yeah. I couldn't find anything about the production or casting of this film. Nothing. Well, so
a shorter episode today then.
Moving right on.
Have you got anything on post-production?
A little bit on how it performed, but not really.
Alright then, so straight into the film.
And we kind of open with Calvin Weber, this kind of eccentric genius, he was a golden boy professor at a university, and then he's given that up because he got rich off making inventions. And we meet him at Pi, and played by the wonderful Christopher Walken, who is just getting to flex his full Christopher Walken being weird.
Yeah, I mean, this is Christopher Walken through and through. I feel like this feels as though this may have been sort of the beginning of Christopher Walken playing those roles that I've grown up with him in.
Probably predates this, to be honest.
Possibly, but I kind of aligned this sort of eccentricity, but that sort of fatherly eccentricity with. I mean, one of the first films that I ever really got to enjoy him in was the Hairspray film.
Okay.
And you see that sort of pretty much imitated in that film as well. And he's through and through Christopher Walken in this, and it's always a pleasure to watch him do his thing.
Yeah, I mean, this has some kind of throwbacks to 5 years earlier, his one scene cameo in Pulp Fiction, which obviously you probably wouldn't have seen at the time, but he's talking about hiding this watch up his bum, and it's only Christopher Walken could pull that off. In this kind of really, as you say, almost fatherly way, talking to young Bruce Willis. I can't remember his character right now, but yeah. I mean, he is something to behold, and I love the fact that he just has built such an identity as an actor. You've got, and you see that from lots of actors in a way, but I don't think in the same way quite. I think he's really built very, very specific character within a character, I guess. Yeah, and I mean, he is a terrific actor. You go back to things like Deer Hunter and stuff like that, and he delivers these incredible performances. But he has such a tendency to be drawn to kind of weirder roles, and it's his cadence. I mean, I've talked a couple of times about people's cadence on the show, but he just has such a unique way of speaking that he is iconic.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think actually it's a really important part of an actor's repertoire is their knowledge of how to use their voice, and he has clearly mastered the understanding of his own, and he's able to, and you see that in the way that he uses it in song, in speech, and the way that it informs his body and his physical movements. He is really kind of got that awareness, which helped him, I think really build his and shape his career as well. Yeah. And so we kind of get the establishing kind of plot of this film, which is, so this film was made in the 90s, and I mean, we were kids in the 90s, so, and obviously in the UK rather than America, so I don't know exactly what kind of the relationship between America and Russia was at that time. But I imagine it would have been quite a ridiculous idea to still be scared of the Cold War. But the whole premise of the film is that this guy is in the 60s, terrified of the Cold War as the Cuban Missile Crisis goes on, gets his family into a bunker, but a plane crashes on top of it, so he thinks that nukes have gone off, and he locks him and his family in there for 35 years. Yeah, I really like the kind of opening scene before that as well. There's kind of like this montage of, underhand sort of gossip going on around this dinner party, this kind of cocktail party that he's throwing.
Yeah, I really enjoy the little dinner party scene.
Yeah, and I love obviously the way it kind of pans from one click to the next, but also the sort of almost snapshots of exposition. It touches on the baseball cards, which are incredibly valuable through the film.
Yeah.
And the sort of brief mention of Helen's pregnancy and stuff. And I really like the way that they've kind of integrated this exposition into just this kind of slightly frantic scene. It's not kind of centered around it. It's not. It doesn't seem to be sort of the centerpiece of the scene itself. But if you're kind of listening closely, you can pick up the details that sort of give you the sort of starting point of the film.
Yeah, I agree. I really like this kind of way of doing exposition, of this kind of quick gossip, jump around a party. And yeah, as you say, it gives you kind of... It establishes Calvin's character, you get the pregnancy. I missed them talking about the baseball cards because I didn't know it was going to be important. But I imagine it's the kind of thing where on rewatch you go, oh yeah, they're kind of, they're discussing that, and that's a key thing in the film.
Yeah, and that's what I like about it, is that, and obviously that's something that you kind of, I guess you'll pick up on more on sort of a rewatch, but because I already knew about the baseball cards, I sort of realised that every single line in that opening scene, however sort of throwaway it seemed, was, a setup for what was going to happen later on.
Yeah, that's just good screenwriting.
Yeah, I mean, that's just testament to the writers for sure, no doubt about it. But it was kind of, I also really liked the production of that scene, it was kind of really well edited, it was sort of really nicely set up, and it kind of eased you into the film without really knowing it was happening. And then all of a sudden you're sort of faced with this huge explosion, and then suddenly it kind of all culminates and you're suddenly underground for 35 years.
Yeah. And then the audacity to, of course, name their child Adam.
Yeah. The arrogance.
Yeah, which they do comment, is it like an affront to God? And they decide it's fine.
Which I quite like, because, that's also a running joke through the film, this sort of using God's name in vain.
Yeah.
Whilst also accepting this sort of total misconception that they are somehow some sort of religious entity as a family, and they don't try and challenge it, they don't really clock it, but they're kind of so on the whole using God's name in vain thing that it's just kind of it's quite funny.
yeah I agree. And then we kind of get to see a little montage of their kind of lives in the shelter and what's going on up above. We see Adam, he's given stocks by his dad, he's given his dad's baseball cards. We see he spends his time learning to box and to dance. So he's developing skills. Meanwhile, up above, we have kind of the saga of the diner.
Which I think is just such a brilliant contrast. It's this sort of is almost like a running joke for a good 25 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah.
And yeah, what is, because we already know that, Calvin is a nutcase, you're kind of almost dismissing everything that he's doing in the bunker. That's what I quite like about this. You're kind of going, well, why are you trying to give him your stocks? Like, it's just, why are you giving, like, he's putting, the thing that has sort of tripped him up is he's putting value in the wrong places from the beginning. And that's why they're in the unnecessarily in this sort of bunker for 35 years in the first place. So you're almost sort of disregarding everything he's doing. You kind of find it a bit unnecessary and a little bit naive and just sort of just a bit pointless. And then obviously as you go through the film, you realise that actually everything he's done does end up becoming incredibly valuable.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of read on it, because as soon as he kind of gives him the stocks, I was like, well, that's clearly going to be important later. Obviously he kind of makes this whole kind of comment to Adam of, these don't have any value, but here you go, you can have them. And they're going to be worth huge amounts of money come the end of the film, and it's going to come into play. So I kind of figured that everything else that they were doing down there would come into play at that point as well.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of, he's clearly somebody who's completely been misled. I mean, he's a conspiracy theorist and right up to the end, like, he still doesn't believe everything that people tell him.
Yeah, he ends the film going on a rant to himself about commies.
Exactly. So he seems slightly deranged from all the way through the film, and I just thought it was a lovely touch that everything that he did do did end up helping Adam, and did end up giving Adam the best life, even though from our perspective from the get-go that wasn't what we thought he was doing. We were sitting there going, why are you keeping him in a bunker? And even no matter what we thought, what he did was ended up giving Adam the best life he could have hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, for me, very much, watching it, it's Chekhov's gun. I don't know if you've heard this saying. It's essentially, if you see a gun on a wall in Act 1, you know it's going to come back in Act 3 in some way. Meanwhile, while that's going on, we have kind of, as you say, this contrast with this diner saga, which starts in the 60s. They build over the house, and it's originally just this like nice diner run by this woman we only know as Mum, with her helper Melcher, who plays a kind of supporting role in the film in general. We see it like transition through to kind of like almost a bar and then into a punk club as Mum gets more and more frustrated with having to do this and hates it more and more, while Melcher just gets more and more out of it generally, to the point that when Mum leaves and gives him this punk club, it just falls apart and he descends into alcoholism, clearly.
And a whole bunch of other stuff, I'm sure. But yeah.
I was going to say this does kind of show the gentrification of the area, but it's not quite gentrification. It's the expansion of the city, because this starts as a suburb when, Calvin and his family are living there. And we see this slowly become inner city and, much more run down and much poorer area of LA, which is now actually like one of the biggest cities on the planet.
Yeah.
And it just shows kind of the growth of that city over the time.
Yeah, I thought, well, I mean, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought of it in that way. And I mean, now you mention it, I think that, it shows the way that this sort of cutesy kind of suburban life almost got absorbed into this kind of concrete lifestyle of the city. But I mean, it also really nicely depicts the change of trends and and fashion and like in general kind of eras.
Yeah, like you get the middle
like eras of music and style and taste.
Yeah, you get that middle era where Melcher's talking about how he misses kind of flower power hippies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really, there's kind of a really nice depiction of you've got Mum and Melcher, and Melcher's sort of the youngster that's growing up into that kind of late 80s era, and that kind of late 80s early 90s era of that sort of rock and getting off your head and etc. And then you've got Mum, who's completely outgrowing it. She's lived her best life, and now she's sort of almost too old for this crap. And I felt like there was kind of also like a really nice little contrast in there as well.
Yeah. And then eventually we've reached the day where the bunker unlocks. And
yes.
And this is kind of where Melcher's whole story comes in, because Calvin, they have to use their back exit, which is like a little lift that goes up, and it bursts through the floor. He's in like some kind of yellow radiation suit, and Melcher just immediately, because he's just been going on this rant about, when you go to Alcoholics or Drugs Anonymous, they're always teaching you to believe in some kind of higher power. And suddenly this being burst through his floor. Yeah. And he suddenly has this religious conversion, which only gets funnier and funnier when Adam comes up and he's like, oh, that was my dad. And he's like, oh, of course, the son. And, plays into that whole kind of Father, Son, Holy Ghost thing.
Yeah. And I think it comes at the right time. He's in Melcher's little speech. I mean, he talks about how, he's always looking up. He's looked up and there's nothing there, and then suddenly something comes through the floor. And I love the fact that they just kind of blindly adopt this quote of "stay away from my elevator" or "leave my elevator alone."
Which that's a great little background joke. Like, they never say it again. It's just written on their stuff in the background.
Yeah. Well, there's also a point where they're kind of just mindlessly chanting it as they're helping them move things out of a moving van into the bunker.
Oh, okay. I kind of missed what they were saying there. I found it kind of hard to hear.
What I quite like about that is that for me it sort of touched on this idea, this notion that religion can sometimes just adopt these such ambiguous phrases or things that can be so misread and just preach them at face value. and just sort of either assume their own kind of understanding of it, or just that it doesn't make sense at all.
It's the Life of Brian thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really cool that amongst this kind of total stupidity of Christopher Walken locking himself underground for 35 years, etc. There's some kind of really nice sort of nods to those sort of socio-political, religious, economic kind of issues, because what I enjoy.
Yeah. And so then Calvin kind of has a look around, and obviously being this kind of, even though he's a bit mad, he's still quite like a stuck-up, upper middle class kind of suburbs family man. So he's completely shocked to find himself in inner city, late 90s LA.
Yeah.
And he immediately assumes that yes, there clearly has been an apocalypse. There's some obviously very funny bits here, particularly when he goes into the adult bookstore and is completely horrified to basically find it's a porno store. And is then later lied to Adam of, you can't go in there, there's toxic gas. Yeah. But then he goes back down, they run out of food, and he begins to fall ill. So Adam needs to go up and get supplies. And this is kind of where the whole Melcher, oh, you're the son, okay, yes. That fits into my religious, epiphany that I'm having. Yeah. And then Adam just being just a lovely bloke. I forgive you for everything you've done. Your life is going to get better now, because he thinks he's talking about, surviving this nuclear holocaust, this nuclear bomb.
It was,
and then Adam, being very strange, obviously racially abuses a postal worker.
It was a shock. You weren't expecting it at all, because it did come out of nowhere, and it did come from a place of total innocence.
It's a classic kind of fish out of water. That's the other
thing, is that
I was very shocked by the
really
dropping
expect
of the
a
N-word.
word like that to.
It was oh my god, they did that
of
kind of
absolutely no malice.
I did have to
whatsoever.
pause it and just go, wow.
But yeah, it was a shock. I thought she dealt with it very well.
Yeah, she's just very confused by him, as everyone is. When he's on the bus and he's going on about, oh, the guy wouldn't accept my 100, and you can initially see the guy sitting next to him's like, oh, this guy's just got hundreds on him, I might try and rob him or something.
Yeah.
And then just slowly gets more and more disturbed by just everything Adam's doing and saying. Everyone is just very confused by his presence, because it is a kind of classic fish out of water thing,
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that shocked me the most was, I don't know how he got through this whole film without being beaten up, or without something actually happening to him.
I mean, someone tried to beat him up.
He did nearly get... Yeah, I mean, that was in a slightly different context. It wasn't.
True.
It wasn't sort of in a Borat way where he was just irritating people and they got annoyed and wanted to kind of retaliate. And yeah, I mean, he did almost get arrested as well. But yeah, I don't know how he managed to get through the whole film without annoying someone so much that he didn't get beaten up.
Yeah. But this is kind of where I think Brendan Fraser's just endearing puppy dog nature, playing this essentially adult child.
Which I think is actually said, that he is a baby man.
Yeah.
Isn't that what his mum says?
And at one point, Troy says to him, she needs a man, you're a boy. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's commented on by other characters. But the fact that Brendan Fraser plays this so endearingly and so sweet is kind of what makes the film. It explains for me why he's not beaten up, because he is so charming that it kind of diffuses those situations. I think if it's anyone else, or most other actors, and they can't pull this off, you just don't buy it at all. You are finding yourself asking, why hasn't this guy just been beaten up or arrested or murdered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think his innocence does kind of play into it the whole way through. It's almost like that innocent, rather than causing frustration or anger, it kind of creates confusion and protects him. People sort of leave interacting with him, completely bewildered and speechless. They don't really have anything to come back with because it's so sort of such a shock.
Yeah, you think if it's a different actor, you know, you might expect people to react more like they do to Borat.
Yeah. But I do think that Brendan Fraser kind of lands right on the line. You know, he does it brilliantly, and he. What I found interesting as well was that he had the kind of physical mannerisms of a kid. I think there was sort of something to be said for that kind of lack of social interaction. Pretty much stunted his growth, and although he's very bright and he does have that certain sense of maturity about him. I noticed that, you know, when Eve fell and cut her knee and he was kind of patching her up, that was sort of the first point where you really get to see him, you know, just after Troy's told him that she needs a man and not a boy. That's the first time you kind of really see him start to sort of tip the scales and lean towards being kind of an actual adult, and you see that in his physicality and the way he changes as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, I think Brendan Fraser's performance in this film is great. Probably, I think, very underrated. I think he's a very underrated actor in general. But we've been talking a lot about kind of comedy stuff. This is a rom-com, so let's introduce the other romantic lead. We have Alicia Silverstone's Eve, who kind of basically steps in to help him out when he's trying to sell his dad's baseball cards, and clearly doesn't know that they're worth. You know, he's trying to sell one for $6,000, and the guy's offering him that's worth $6,000, and the guy's offering him $500 for the lot.
Yeah,
and Eve gets herself fired, you know, trying to stop this, and then immediately thinks he's a creep, and he basically has to offer a card worth $4,000 to get her to drive him to a Holiday Inn.
Yeah. I love that this kind of very quickly becomes his currency, even though he's got hundreds and hundreds on him. And, you know, there's a couple of really sort of... There's like when he gets asked to show his card when he's checking in to the Holiday Inn, and he's like... And then he pulls it out, and of course you can.
I think that's my favourite joke in the film.
I just like this kind of... I like this running use of the cards through the film.
Yeah, I agree. I love the running gag of the cards. As I say, my favourite gag in the film is the one where the hotel receptionist asks to see his card, and he just pulls out a baseball card. And then Eve, you know, she's obviously deep down a good person, and having taken this $4,000 baseball card for a lift to a hotel, feels guilty and comes and brings it back. After which Adam, you know, he hires her to help him get all the supplies and sell his baseball cards for what they're worth, for $1,000 a week. So, you know, she still fleeces him a little bit here.
Yeah, she's taking a cut. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we kind of get this montage where we, you know, see them getting supplies, going to the supermarket, and we kind of learn that she's very against marriage after he asks her to help him find a wife. And, you know, she explains kind of everyone in her family's gone through a divorce, and obviously him being essentially from the 60s is shocked by this because it just wasn't a thing back then. And the great little shot of him trying to learn to drive, and it's just horrible.
Yeah,
I'm amazed no one was killed.
She ends up. I know he ends up on the curb, doesn't he?
Yeah,
on the pavement. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, it's kind of like this slightly drawn out montage of him just getting used to different conventions and you know the sort of development of social life. Yeah, and establishing
the chemistry between these two, and I think the two actors do have excellent chemistry.
Yeah, I think they work off each other really well. I think there's kind of this sort of really nice contrast between, you know, Eve seems really kind of down to earth but doesn't have a clue what she wants, whereas Adam is all over the shop but knows exactly what he wants.
Yeah, that's a really good contrast.
I think that there's kind of like this really nice push and pull between them, and it's almost like within themselves, there's that sort of conflict of I'm all over the place, but I know exactly what I want, or vice versa, and so. And then when you kind of pair them up, it's almost like complete opposites attract. And I think that just kind of makes for really nice chemistry between the two characters.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I really like that kind of comparison. And, she's kind of very streetwise, he's clueless. But yeah, as you say, they are very different in many ways. But they're also just underneath, obviously he's very openly a very sweet person. But she is... I think she tries to hide it a bit, but she is actually very sweet. She does come back when she takes the $4,000 card. She is willing to help him, and she brings him home, meets her roommate Troy, and we get to meet her ex Cliff, played by the wonderful Nathan Fillion.
Yeah, what a lovely little surprise.
He's just such a smug, terrible person,
isn't he just? And I've got to say, I do like his sign off on this film. That sort of, that kind of like when he's trying to beat up Adam, and it's just not even a contest, and like 3 times I think he's like, oh yeah, no, you're right, we shouldn't fight, and then goes for him again completely, just get punched in the face. And there's just like this silent retreat off screen, and then he's done. That's it, you don't see him again.
I think the first time he goes to punch him, gets punched. The second time he's like, we shouldn't do this here, we should do this outside. Goes to punch him, gets punched. And he's like, no, you know what, you're right, we shouldn't fight at all. Goes to punch him again and gets punched.
Yeah. Until he's just got nothing left to say, so all he can do is just walk off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great little bit part.
Yeah.
And I did like that, after there being a couple of mentions of little cameos in Serenity last week, I liked that it almost did full circle, and we had a Serenity cameo. So he was a very nice little addition, and obviously gave Eve some backstory as well. And you kind of understand why she has her backup with Adam as well. And this is kind of the point where you meet Troy as well, who I actually really liked as a character.
I agree. I think there is a slight kind of thing where he plays into the gay best friend trope in rom-coms. There's a little bit. It's either there's a gay best friend or there's a black best friend, and those kind of parts don't tend to get leads. But I still really enjoy him as a character. I like his relationship and dynamic with Adam a lot. The whole this kind of first scene where he's sort of interrogating him about where he's from, and Adam's really quick to answer everything about Alaska's very funny. Yeah,
I do like that he very quickly builds this relationship and with Adam, and he ends up having his own friendship with him.
Yeah.
And he is a very likable character. I do agree that he does play into a couple of the stereotypes. He leans into it quite a lot.
Which is kind of the tropes of the genre, and like a trope that I think people want to get away from
as well. Yeah. But I think that the dynamic of the character fits really nicely between Adam and Eve.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that there's no kind of, he's not self-serving in any way, and I quite like that there's no kind of ulterior motive. He doesn't really have, and he doesn't have his own storyline, which I think. I think it's probably more to do with the era.
As I say, it's a trope that I think people are trying to get away from now.
Yeah, but he does. I think he does have a kind of really kind influence on the film.
Yeah, I like kind of the very long drawn out gag that you get at the end, where obviously Eve explains that he's gay, and clearly Adam doesn't know what this means, because in the vernacular of the 60s, gay was just a synonym for like happy. It's like an old one. And so at the end he says thanks for being happy all the time.
And that was what I quite liked, was that wasn't, it was ongoing but wasn't mentioned.
No, it was just this
was
great callback at the end.
Yeah, it was kind of assumed the whole way through, and and it was reflected in, obviously, at the end. But Adam's sort of continuous naivety, were sort of almost brought him up to that moment, and then obviously throw back to the gag from right at the beginning. Yeah, it's nice.
And then we get kind of this lovely couple of scenes of Adam kind of getting to do firsts. Firstly, Troy gives him a makeover, and then Adam gets to see the sea. He gets to see a baseball game finally, and his whole bottom, I understand it now, I can see it.
Yeah.
It's very good.
And I quite like the repetition of the line, because he must. And we don't really get to see the game, but just that sort of absolute nonsensical idea that sports happens just because it must.
Yeah.
Like, that player runs there, yeah, but why? Because he has to. And there's no reasoning to any of it. It's just because he's got to. And so you're kind of going, how can you not understand how this works? But then actually, if you break it down in that sense, and you kind of go, well, why are they doing it? It does kind of make sense. Like, why? Of course he doesn't understand what his dad's talking about, because the concept of sport is just so, abstract for somebody who hasn't experienced it firsthand. This idea that, you can imagine that if you have never seen a sports game, or you've never experienced it, somebody going, if you put it into the context of football, or soccer for the American listeners, because there are plenty, if you put it into the context of football, and you're telling somebody who's never seen any sports in their life, people run around the pitch and kick a ball, you're going to go, well, why? Because they have to. But why?
Yeah.
Because they have to. So it actually kind of is a really nice detail to pick up on, that, even things as seemingly normal as sport literally would make no sense to somebody that has never kind of witnessed it firsthand or experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, you're completely right. It's something I didn't think about, but you are completely right. that would be completely alien to him, and to see it finally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we move into kind of the big set piece, or the big major set piece in the back half of the film, which is at this 40s club, where they take Adam to meet a girl. We get introduced to Sophie, who Eve clearly hates with a passion.
Yeah, for not a real... Well, it's not really explained why.
Yeah, it's just something in their backstory, they're just those people you don't get on with.
Yeah, I suppose.
Although you can kind of, I guess from clues, I gather, that Sophie seems like quite, upper class and is jetting off to Paris regularly, whereas obviously Eve is struggling in terrible jobs, working for horrible people. And then there's kind of this whole part where they send him off to talk to a woman, assuming he's going to do terribly. And, Troy's like, I can't watch, but he's also kind of really enjoying it. And then Adam just smashes it.
Yeah, and what's really nice about this is that he smashes it by being him.
Yeah, just by being nice and kind and
very
much
but then
himself.
There's also and you kind of think, oh well, that's cute, because he was just sweet, and he was nice, and they loved that, but actually they also were kind of completely misjudging everything he was saying.
Oh yeah.
So it was like the kind of real sort of genuine, kind, open influence of Adam, and then these two women who were didn't particularly have much depth to them, and they were sort of misinterpreting not just what Adam was saying, but Adam as a person.
Yeah, they thought the kind of stuff he was coming out with, very genuinely, were jokes.
Yeah, and which has kind of been what the audience has been thinking for the whole time, and then suddenly, he's dancing with both of them in this massive, apparently improvised dance routine.
Yeah. And Brendan Fraser's got some moves.
Yeah, I think you get to see him move his hips a bit, and I thought he was quite good.
I prefer his singing, which we'll get onto in a minute.
Yes, but yeah, I think it's quite nice to, like, this feels like the pinnacle of the physical acting in this film from him. You know, up until this point, he's really used his physicality to kind of build up this sort of giddy, naive little kid, or the persona.
Yeah.
And then it all kind of pours out in this dance routine, and it is everything that he is, but 10 times bigger, and people love it.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's in an environment and he's in a context where, you know, he is top dog and everybody is admiring him, which obviously he's never experienced in that way before. And yeah, it just feels like a real kind of crescendo up to this point where, you know, it all comes out and he's sort of letting rip, really.
Yeah, and obviously Eve, immeasurably jealous at this point, is hating how successful he's being. And then there's obviously the moment where kind of he catches her eye and gives her a little wave, and she has to pretend to be happy for him. Yeah, and so this is kind of like the moment where I don't think Eve even quite admits it to herself at this point, that she very much has feelings for Adam back, but this is where the audience go, okay, she 100% does.
Yeah, I think there's been hints at it up until this point, but this is the moment, yeah, for sure.
Adam's always been very open about his feelings, but she's kind of been much more reserved, and this is the point yet where it's just like laid out on a plate. And so kind of out of jealousy, this is where she starts talking to Cliff. Nathan Fillion obviously comes in being all very suave and cool, and then immediately gets beaten in this fight.
Yeah. And a fight which he initiates and the other guy doesn't want several times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she goes home, and then we cut to Troy coming back with no Adam. Eve assumes that he left with the two girls he was dancing with. And Troy this is where Troy makes her confront her feelings for him and actually like admit them.
Yeah, I think this is kind of where, you know, Troy's been important in helping Adam sort of develop a personality beyond the bunker.
Yeah.
And experience things that he's never had the chance to before. But this is the moment where I think you see his relationship with Eve.
Yeah.
Most of all. And I think, I mean, this for me was one of my favourite parts of Troy's role in this film, actually.
I agree. Completely agree.
Because you see it so clearly, and, you know, you've seen Troy sort of stand by when sort of Nathan Fillion's character is being awful to her, and you see him just kind of sit back and support her as much as he can, but without really trying to tell her what's what. And then I guess there's just this moment where he's like, no, enough is enough.
He feels very like the audience surrogate at this point. Like, this is the point. The audience have watched her, and the audience at this point is like, come on, just accept what you're feeling. And he's the same.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it comes at the right time.
And then he reveals that Adam left with Sophie, at which point she immediately sprints out of the house to get in the car. And Adam shows up and gives her a jump scare, and she gets a very small cut on her knee. That she acts very dramatic.
Limping as though she's broken her leg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at first I thought like she'd broken her ankle or so, you know, sprained her ankle, and then it's like, no, she's just got a cut on her knee.
Yeah. And I think what's quite nice in this moment is that, in terms of the kind of physical absurdity of all these emotions that are coming out, you know, she's been quite reserved about it, and meanwhile Adam's been, you see every emotion that Adam feels, you see embodied in him as well. Like, you see the way that he kind of physically responds to it. And at that moment where she's sort of finally accepted that actually she does love him, and she's opened up to that. You finally start to see that kind of emotion get embodied, and I think in some sort of weird way the limp is part of it, that kind of over exaggeration, or that sort of that kind of like childlike response to something that is otherwise not necessarily minor but not particularly evident, and that's something that Adam has displayed all the way through the film, and it's almost like, okay, now it's her turn.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, you do see the roles reverse here as well.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's all part and parcel, isn't it? Like, it's not just, oh yeah, she started limping because she was feeling that way and blah blah. Like, the roles actually switch at this point.
Yeah, and he gets to be the expert at something. He comes in saying, I know more about first aid than you do about baseball card. He gets to be the one who's actually showing off life skills at this point. He sings her On the Street Where You Live. It's very sweet.
Yeah, it is very cute.
And they have their first
and
kiss.
It was better than I expected as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he struggled with a couple of the high notes, but apart from that...
Yeah, he did completely change key by the end of it.
Yeah.
But, it was sweet.
It was very sweet.
For the most part, in tune.
And listen, I'm a big Brendan Fraser fan. Have been ever since The Mummy.
Which might be on my list at some point.
It might be on my list as well.
I'm pretty sure that we have now at some point named my whole list. But yes, I ever since seeing The Mummy as a kid, I've loved Brendan Fraser, and I think this, you see his character here. You see Adam become more self-assured, more assertive. He seems like he belongs where he is. He has to become the sort of, I don't want to say fatherly figure, because in this context it's a bit weird, but
he becomes a grown-up, as you said.
He has to grow up, and it's triggered by Troy telling him, and that sort of realization. Up until this point, nobody has been honest with him. His mum and his dad have lied to him. Eve has never told him how she feels. Nobody is being honest with him. And then as soon as somebody is honest with him and tells him the truth, you see that change. And he becomes the carer in this scene.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that.
And
then he messes it all up.
It works really well. And then he messes... Yeah.
Yeah, and then he messes it all up by confessing his past and that he wants to take her to live underground, and that's going to disturb anyone, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I felt disturbed as well. I was like, oh, yes, it's working really well, and then, nope. And you could feel Eve's upset in this moment.
But I also love the fact that he doesn't get it. Like, he still thinks it's gone really well.
Yeah. And he walks away pretty jolly and glad that it's happened.
Yeah. Somewhere in all of this, his mum did briefly come up to the surface and immediately gets scared off by Melcher and his new cult.
Yeah, I actually think Helen is a very underrated character in this film.
Yeah, I mean, Sissy Spacek, who's great.
I love that she is just becoming increasingly an alcoholic.
Yeah. She's giving him the instructions. You need to go to a grocery store, to a hardware store, and then just at the end she throws in, and there's somewhere called a liquor store.
Yeah. And then by the end of it he comes back down and she's just standing there with a martini, and she's got that kind of, I don't know what it is, but it seems to be some sort of slimming band machine thing. And she's just standing there, and she clearly just becoming more and more of a state through the whole film.
And she's been stuck underground for 35 years, and now her time where she's allowed to go back up, she can't, because she thinks it's still too dangerous up there.
Yeah. So I do enjoy her character as well.
And then we see that Eve's kind of stopped helping Adam. Obviously, she's pretty disturbed, and Troy's helping him instead. And they drive past this adult bookshop next to the bar, and Adam excitedly runs there, finds the bar again, finds Melcher, heads back down, meets his parents again, And well, no, he doesn't quite meet his parents at this point. He knows it's there.
Yeah.
So he heads back to Eve's to kind of, I guess, say goodbye and, pick up all the rest of the stuff. And she has got a psychiatrist and wants to have him committed. Because...
Yeah.
Yeah, if someone came out with that story to you. Because also, he still very much using the phrase, when the bomb was dropped in, 1962. Like, he's still talking about it like a matter of fact. Whereas, obviously, there was no nuclear bomb.
Yeah, the thing about this point is that up until this moment, you kind of start... You spend the film thinking, Eve actually really likes Adam for who he is.
Mm.
And then you kind of don't realise that, or don't remember that she actually doesn't know who he is. Like, as far as she knows, he's from out of town and he's just a bit odd.
Yeah.
And then she does find out who he is, and it's too much for her to handle. And obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't like him or whatever. But,
yeah, I think it's more that she suddenly thinks that he's delusional and that he might need some help because he is imagining these things, such as a nuclear bomb being dropped on LA, which didn't happen.
Yeah. This scene where, he just says, I just want to go home.
Yeah.
And, and she walks him out of the door, and I feel like you see kind of a really nice, emotional aspect of Brendan Fraser's acting. And ultimately, this is what this role does for him, is it gives him such scope. He has moments of, like, physical acting, brilliant comedy, those kind of emotional moments, the moments where he is that sort of sexy, like, hunk, and
the Rick O'Connell.
Yeah, there's just so much for him to do in this part, and he really kind of plays it well.
Yeah.
That it is a sad moment, and then it's just completely undercut by him running away.
I was about to say, I love the kind of hard cut of, he's got this sad moment, I just want to go home. As soon as he is out that door, you just see him sprint past the window.
Yeah, it's just so brilliantly done, and and I feel like this is kind of what this whole film is, and like you have that sort of the ups and the downs, and it's that from the beginning, you have you're focusing on the family in the bunker, and then it's straight up to the bar upstairs, and it's into like a comedy routine, and then straight back down, and it's all kind of cute and lovey-dovey, and then it's back up, and you have those ups and downs, and the stop-start of it all the way through. But this is just this point is just brilliant, and it's such a contrast.
It's a great hard switch.
And you see that in the other characters as well. I mean, you see it in the psychiatrist, like she just loses it.
We'll go. Obviously, before he gets away, he does a lap around the block, being chased by her assistant. Comes back and gives Eve the hotel room key. Says, have the rest of my baseball cards. Just pay the bill. Gets in the truck they've rented. Reverses into the psychiatrist's car before driving off, and she just goes mad, and Troy's just there making these little underhand barbs about it, which is great. And so this is where he does go back down, meets his parents again, and this is my other favourite joke of the film, is where he says, I might be being chased by a psychiatrist, and Melcher's just it happens. It's such a great little slips in there joke.
Yeah, I did notice that. And I like the fact that Melcher is now just down there so casually as well. Like, he's been idolising this for the whole time. And now it's just like he's just accepted it for what it is. And actually it's just a family living in a bunker underground. And that's kind of so much.
But he hasn't accepted it at this point. Like, they say later on that they have to convince him that they're not God. Like, he still hasn't accepted it at this point.
So he's just kind of explaining to what he thinks is God that sometimes you just get chased by a psychiatrist.
And this is where even Troy go to the hotel room, find the stocks, find stuff from the 60s, kind of go, oh, this is all true. Find the stocks are worth millions. And we get this kind of nice, they go to the adult bookstore. because they didn't see where Adam actually was going. They can't find him. It's, classic rom-com. Are they not going to find each other? And then at the last second, as they're driving away, Eve spots him and they reunite, and it's all lovely.
Yeah, I've got to say as well, just before we get to that moment, I was very impressed by how helpful the owner of the adult bookstore was.
These two guys come in and just start stomping on his floor.
Stamping on their floor. And he's like, yeah, of course we've got an exit out back.
I do love the little joke where they ask about the basement and he goes, no, all the good stuff's up front.
Yeah. It's a nice little detail in there.
And kind of, the end of the film is they get all this stuff down into the basement, and Adam and Eve come up with this plan of, well, you guys, 2 months, lock yourselves away, and we got to prepare some stuff. And they rebuild Melcher's bar, make it a 50 themed nightclub, and this is where they kind of mention that they get him to stop believing that they're God.
Yeah.
And they essentially build a replica of their original house out in the countryside,
which I thought was really damn cute.
Very cute.
I was amazed at how they managed to do it 35 years later to completely replicate both the exterior and the interior.
The exterior is very impressive. I imagine the interior is because they did a lot of the bunker to look like the house.
Possibly, yeah.
And I guess they kind of got bits of the exterior, like they have an outside bit of the bunker.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. But it was very cute. Very cute indeed. Cute. Yeah.
And Helen's little bit of, where Calvin says, it's not much different to the bunker, the shot of him in front of the house, and then cut to Helen in front of massive open green spaces going, it's very different.
Yeah, and I really like that it imitates that she does at the beginning when she's in the bunker. When they first go down to the bunker, and she does exactly the same thing. There's the same shot, and you've got the rest of the bunker behind her. And she goes, it's very different. And I really like that kind of, almost like the top and tail of that line, and that shot. Being kind of reused, but obviously in a different context, and it kind of, is almost like the cherry on top at the end, which is really sweet.
That's a great spot. I didn't notice that. I love it. And so that's Blast from the Past, which it opened. It didn't perform well at the box office. Not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
It opened at number 5 in the North American box office. It did just about manage to make its production budget back, grossed 40 million on a 35 million budget. I think a good portion of that was actually from outside of America, which is very strange. It was mixed reviews from critics. They kind of generally thought a really strong original premise, entertaining, but it wasn't consistently funny. And while I agree, I don't think it's like making me laugh every 2 to 3 minutes. I think there are enough jokes in there that land. I know critic Mark Commode has like this kind of laugh test where he says, if it hits like 6 laughs, then it's passing as a comedy, And I think this blows past that. Yeah,
I think you used that as an example with Mystery Men as well.
Yeah, and I mean it's making that its quota easily.
Yeah, and I don't think it is just there for the comedy. It does really fulfil a lot of other kind of requirements of a rom-com, and it does it really nicely.
Yeah, I've got to say I enjoyed watching this for the first time. I was a little bit, I'm not sure I'm going to like it, and then I did. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised.
Good. I know you like a rom-com.
I do.
Yeah.
There's an era of rom-com I don't like, and this is kind of from around that era, but it's not in the style of those.
Yeah. And I also know that Alicia Silverstone has done other films that you're a fan of as well, so
she was in Clueless.
Yeah. So I know that that if nothing else, that would have been a silver lining. Hey,
it's Rick O'Connell and Cher Horowitz. Like, what's not to love? The Mummy meets Clueless.
Yeah, no, I mean that's got to be heaven for you, right?
Oh, I love them. I love both those films. So any kind of final thoughts on the film?
Just that it was really nice to go back and rewatch it, and it was an easy watch, and I remembered why I enjoyed it, and I would happily watch it again. If you haven't seen it and you fancy watching something that's kind of easy, feel good, and just there's there's nothing particularly shocking or upsetting. The twists and turns are not too jolting. It's just kind of a really nice film to watch, and there are a couple of moments where it tries to tug at the heartstrings and does that quite well as well. So yeah, good watch.
I agree. It's just a lovely film.
Yeah, and it's your turn to choose the next episode's film. So over to you.
Well, I've been doing this kind of favourite characters thing.
Yes.
So we're continuing that.
Okay.
But I think this might be my favourite film we've done on the podcast so far.
Oh, really?
I'd say this is a top 5 film of all time for me.
Wow, okay.
Which, given that 3 of those 5 are taken up by The Lord of the Rings, is not a huge amount of space.
So is this one I know?
I don't know if you've seen it. I know you've heard of it.
Okay, I think I know what you're going to say, but we'll see at the end. Go on.
We're doing Spirited Away.
Yeah, I knew I was going to be Spirited Away. Yeah. Do you know what? I was waiting for this to come up. I am actually very excited to see it because I've heard great things about it, and I have been meaning to see it for a long time under your advisement. So yeah, I think I'm really glad that we get to watch one that I've heard you talk about so much.
Yeah. So actually, this is a bunch of my favourite characters, but in terms of that kind of list that I've mentioned before, that I made, the main character, Chihiro/Sen, is one of my all-time favourites. And I mean, this film was coming up at some point. I was picking this at some point. Yeah. And I'll go more into it next time. Yeah,
I feel like this is kind of been a long time coming, so I'm really glad that we are here and that moment has arrived.
Yeah. Okay, and I've got a little bit of a closer. Cinemas are open again here and over in most of the US, and new films are coming out, which is very exciting.
Yes.
And it's brought in the last few days a bunch of new trailers.
It has.
So I just wanted to kind of run through some of those.
Cool, yeah. Have you seen any films yet?
No, I was meant to go to the cinema at the weekend. And
oh my gosh, have I been to the cinema before you then?
Well, so I was going to go on the weekend, and I had it booked for like 5:30 or something. And I went to the pub at like 1 o'clock, and I thought plenty of time. And then 5:30 came round, I was still in the pub.
Right. Typical, Shug. Yeah, I went to see Spiral.
Oh, okay, I heard bad things.
Which, so for anyone who doesn't know, it's the spin-off of the Saw films, and it was thoroughly disappointing.
I mean, haven't they all been since the first one?
I mean, there's some sort of satisfaction in watching and kind of not knowing what the traps are going to be, or seeing the sort of gruesomeness of it all. But and Samuel L. Jackson is Samuel L. Jackson in it. There are, he's famed for the one profanity, which we kind of joked
MFer.
beforehand. Yeah, which we sort of joked beforehand was going to come up, and sure enough, I think twice or thrice it did.
Yeah.
And Chris Rock was, in my humble opinion, absolutely dreadful. It was like watching somebody who had his face painted angry. His performance was monotonous. It was just there was. I talk about how much I love nuance in a performance, and there was just none of that. The writing was a mess. It was
okay. On the writing, I will say I have no intention of seeing this film, so I read a synopsis.
Yeah.
And as I was reading the synopsis, I very early guessed who the villain twist was going to be, and I was bang on the buddy.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty obvious. Not only because it's a Saw film, but also because of the circumstances under which that character appears. It's like it couldn't be anyone else. But also just the conclusion of the film and everything was just so rushed. There was no context into the storyline really, and it was just a bit of a shambles. But it was nice to sit in a theatre again, and it was nice to experience cinema in its most immersive form. or one of its most immersive
I
forms.
do intend to go see the new Demon Slayer movie as soon as I finish the first season of the show.
Right. Okay.
But onto these trailers.
Yes.
I said a bunch have dropped. First off, Gunpowder Milkshake, which is kind of this very entertaining looking action film starring Karen Gillan and a bunch of other badass women. And I think this just looks like terrifically good fun. I can't wait.
When's that coming out?
I did not find any of these dates out. I just saw the trailers and I'm like, they're all coming out this year, I believe.
Okay, cool.
We got a trailer for an upcoming Marvel film, which is like one of their new projects called The Eternals.
Yes, I've seen this one.
This film's directed by Chloe Zhao, who just won Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars for
Amazing.
Nomadland.
Great.
The trailer very much feels like it's got her kind of stamp of not much is going on in the trailer, and it's just very, very pretty.
Yeah, it was very picturesque.
Yes.
Visually very pretty.
And oh my word, is this cast stacked.
I was going to say, there is a big cast involved here.
And a lot of hugely talented actors, and Kit Harington's there as well.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree. There was also a moment where I think it was Kit Harington cut to Richard Madden, and I was like, oh yeah.
They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing.
They knew it was intentional. But yes, a very, very good cast, and Kit Harington.
I think this is currently my most anticipated like new Marvel property.
Right. Okay.
I don't know what kind of the deal with the story is. I'm just very excited. Like, it's got Chloe Zhao's stamp on it, so I'm excited.
I quite like it when trailers don't give too much away. I think,
get into more of that in a minute.
Yeah, one that has. If I hope I'm not stepping on your toes. I probably am not. Is Dear Evan Hansen, which is it's a musical at the moment. It's won Tony's and it's won Olivier's. It's as a show the music itself doesn't give much away. So if you haven't seen the show, it's kind of hard to guess what goes on, what the plot is entirely. And I'm one of those people that hasn't seen the show yet. And then you see this trailer and it gives it away in about 2 minutes, and you just spend the whole trailer going, okay, well now I know it. And
to that end, I did see a tweet which said, yes, that really is what the plot of Dear Evan Hansen's about.
Yeah, basically. It's the musical or the show condensed into 2 minutes, and now it feels almost like you don't need to see it.
One I didn't give you any advance warning about at all, because this one came out a couple of hours ago, which will really date exactly when this podcast is being made. And I don't think you saw the first one of this. I think you saw a different film called Escape Room. There is Escape Room 2 Tournament of Champions.
I've seen 2 escape room films.
Okay, so the one this is a sequel of was, for about 70% of the runtime, a very fun little kind of horror thriller. And then as soon as they started answering any questions about like what was going on, it kind of fell apart.
Right. Was this the one where there was the kind of... Have you seen it, the first one?
Yes.
And was this the one where there was like the sort of frozen lake that was kind of...
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That was sort of, simulated. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they have like the upside down room. Upside down bar.
Yeah.
It was quite a fun film until they completely generically answered every question in the most generic way possible. Yeah, but I'm intrigued by a sequel. So
okay, cool.
And I saw someone on Twitter saying this scratches the itch I've got for characters saying the title of the film in the film itself. As one of them declared, "This is some kind of tournament of champions."
That's a very niche title to be able to write into the script.
I mean, I did. For those who don't know, I do some writing over on my blog at shuggysays.com. And I did a list of the best movie title drops in films. And
what was the best one, just out of interest?
It is a film that we have done on the podcast. It was Jurassic Park.
Okay, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Yeah. It's a fun list.
The recorder.
Cue the recorder. Yeah. Which, when the video I put up of that music copyright strike on...
oh, really?
On Twitter.
Wow, I didn't realise it was that good.
Yeah. And the final one that I'm talking about, I think I mentioned it last season when you asked about what films I was most excited for.
Mm-hmm.
Edgar Wright's new film, Last Night in Soho.
Right.
I am obsessed with this trailer. This trailer is so good.
When did it drop?
Yesterday, I think.
Okay.
So these are all from the last 2 days.
Right. So relief in not only kind of highly anticipating this film, but also having a good trailer.
Yeah, as I say, this gives away very little.
Yeah.
It's the two main actors, Anya Taylor-Joy, who's I think just incredible, and Thomasin, I want to say her surname's Mackenzie, from Jojo Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
They look great. It looks weird. It looks creepy. I'm so in for this film.
What's it about? Just out of interest.
I don't really know. I'm not 100% sure.
You like the vibes, basically.
I like the vibes. It seems to be from the trailer, Thomasin Mackenzie's character is transported back in time and becomes Anya Taylor-Joy's character. But there are also times where they're both there. I don't know. And then there's something creepy going on. Matt Smith is there looking suave but also being creepy.
So Matt Smith is playing Matt Smith.
I think he's suaver and creepier than normal.
Okay. Oh wow.
I mean, I don't know. I see him as the Doctor, who's his Doctor was a kind of very manic child essentially. But the whole of this trailer, there's one actual line of dialogue. It's all just underscored by Anya Taylor-Joy singing a cover of Downtown.
Okay. Nice.
Which is very creepy.
Yeah.
And also very kind of ethereal and beautiful as well. I'm so in for this. I'm obsessed. I've watched it about 12 times.
Lovely.
So yeah, that's new trailers that have just dropped, and I can't wait to see a bunch of these films in cinemas.
Nice. Cool.
Yep. And that's it for this week. You can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean and YouTube. You can follow us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter and at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me everywhere at Shuggy Says.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Nyrees, Nyerrees, and on Instagram at ReeseNye.
And we're back to talk Studio Ghibli in Spirited Away next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.